on whether or not there would be, an excessive amount of work.
Okay. In conclusion, Madam Chair, would you agree, though, with the position put forward by Senator Nola a moment ago, that the unintended consequences of a bill like this is that you have some people who would be caught initially exchanging an ecstasy pill at a rave dance, or whatever you call it, that they go at, facing a minimum sentence in jail, thereby destroying the person's life forever with that sentence. And finally, concluding with this question to you, you sing the praises of the impaired driving section, but constantly we see in the newspapers of people who've been convicted 8 and 9 times before and are still being convicted again. And it all goes back to the discretion given by the Crown in the legislation to enter the previous record. It's in this legislation as well. So do you agree with the built-in discretion given to the Crown as to whether or not to trigger the minimum sentence in some cases?
Well, to answer the first question, I would disagree. Okay. From experience, and I'm sure that my colleague to my right will most likely disagree as well. The exchange of drugs, whether it be ecstasy, cocaine, amongst individuals, again, is not something that we realistically would lay charges with. There's a lot of different components.
But you could, though. You could.
You could. Theoretically, yes. You could. Yeah. But I'd like to see anyone show me a case today, right now, show me a case where an individual exchanged an ecstasy pill and was charged with trafficking.
I'll get
so from my experience, all I can talk about is my own experience and the experience of other police officers and the information that I've received from members.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that there's, the CPA has always advocated on the 4 main issues when it comes to drugs. Prevention, treatment is all part of this. And this piece of legislation, as far as we are concerned, sir, is one piece, is only one piece.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Baker. Senator Willis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for that presentation. It's helpful and it's refreshing, I think, for all of us to hear from people like yourselves who are dealing with this at ground level. You're dealing with the public, you're dealing with those that are impacted directly by the evils of the drug trade, and it's one thing to talk about it around a boardroom table. It's one thing to talk about it in the classroom, but it's quite another to live it and see that house go up in flames, as you pointed out, Your Worship. It has obviously a strong impact on you. Just the first question I would have, and I would not direct it to any one of you in particular, the whole issue of mandatory minimums is an essential element of Bill C-15, as you're well aware. We've heard from different witnesses who have questioned the effectiveness of mandatory minimums, and that, I guess from some of the testimony I've heard, they would suggest mandatory minimums will do nothing to enhance the safety and security of the general public. And really, that's what this is all about. 99% of the population is not involved in criminal activity. That is who we're trying to protect. The question I have for you is, how effective do you see, or how would you care to comment on the effectiveness of mandatory minimums in enhancing the security and safety of our citizens?
In the Waterloo region, we had occasion to have a number of grow operations, and we ended up with this inundated with them, and we began the court processes. And at first, our judges were giving conditional sentence, house arrests, to the offenders. We took extra steps working through the Crown, and we were able to present victim impact statements from all aspects of our community, and a trend began where they were giving a minimum of 1 year in our community. And what that effectively did was it drove the growers out of our community. So instead of growing in the region of Waterloo because they knew they would get a minimum of a year sentence there, they would move to Stratford, they would move to London, they would move to York Region, they would move to Toronto, Halton, Ottawa. And so, in that case, I believe that they were deterred by the minimum, or what they knew they would get in Kitchener, Waterloo, or the region of Waterloo, and so they moved on. And because they're business people, this is a matter of being business people. If they're in jail, they can't do business. And this is not a street corner ounce dealer. This is a faction or spoke of organized crime that is making a product that drives other criminal activity. That's what this is. And they can't afford to be out of business. And so we do the investigations, we get them before the courts, and in my view, it does have a deterrent, because my experience has shown me that it did, and it happened in Waterloo Region. So will it work? I think it's a step in the right direction. And I reiterate what Mr. Momy said. I mean, it's one fork in a 3 or 4 pronged approach to the problem in Canada with drugs. And that enforcement, education, rehabilitation for those affected by addiction, and judicial support. And I suppose that's what we're asking for here, is for you to support us.
Yeah. It's not one size fits all.
Absolutely
there's a
not.
comprehensive approach that's needed and is being taken.
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Garis.
I would like to draw your attention to my written submission. It would be on page 5, and it would be the third to the last paragraph. And that paragraph talks about deterrent factor, and we actually did an evaluation on our programs in the city of Surrey about what was going on with these individuals in terms of the propensity for reestablishment.
Tell me where in your...
It's page 5. It's the
Thank you.
third to the last paragraph.
Right.
Starting earlier in 2007.
I'm with you.
What we did is we hired a master's student to evaluate the reestablishment of marijuana growers in our city in terms of, and what deterrents were actually having an effect on them. And basically, we looked at whether they were charged by police, a traditional approach, whether they were approached from an inspection process, and then the city brought in sanctions. They brought in sanctions, which basically was a bylaw that allowed us to cost recover every ounce of time that went into the investigation of that particular occupancy. It allowed us to remove occupancy from the home, so in other words, it couldn't be habitated. And it also said you must remediate, you must hire professionals, registered professionals, to come in, test the pesticides in the house, test the mold, and come up with a remediation strategy that brings it back to normal health and safety standards, along with the electrical system, along with the building system. And guess what? After we implemented that, nobody came back. So I would say, in essence, what we've done is we've taken them, the profit out of their business, and we've sent them on their way. If mandatory sentences might do the same thing, it takes them off the field of play, and it puts them in jail where they can't earn their living because it's illegal, and it's the same deterrent factor. It's a little bit different, but it does have the same effect. That is a master's thesis that was written, and I'd be happy to share it with you because it was commissioned by the City of Surrey, and I'd be happy to send it to the clerk.
If you would send it to the clerk, please,
Yes.
we'd be glad to see it.